Hello and welcome. Welcome everybody to the Columbus Metropolitan Club. You guys did such a good job of quieting down earlier, I just have to say. It's not like when we have the political forums, we have all these political people in here, and they continue to talk. I'm Kermit Whitfield, member of the CMC Board of Trustees and Senior Assistant Vice President of Communications at United Way of Central Ohio. It's great to see everyone here today. And look at what we got you for the view and the weather. Today, CMC is proud CMC is brought to us, thank you, with support from Carlisle, Patchen, and Murphy LLP and Battelle, both of whom have many friends and associates in the audience. Won't you please help me thank them? In the news today, and pretty much every day, is a story about data hacking, loss of privacy, and how somebody somewhere is trying to get you and information all about you from your bank, your social media account, your phone, your Google search, or from that "what animal are you" test that you took on Facebook last week. For some reason, wombat. I don't know why. I don't know what the algorithm is. It wasn't all that long ago when paper shredders were up to the task of protecting our privacy. Now, since paper records have gone the way of the dodo for a number of places, protecting our privacy and securing our connected world is the task of the day for our best and our brightest. Please welcome Chief Information Officer, the Ohio Attorney General's Office, Ervan Rogers II, Chief Information Officer, Battelle, David White, Vice President, Chief Cybersecurity Innovator, Columbus Collaboratory, Jeff Schmidt, and our host, VP of Product and Business Development for the Columbus Collaboratory, Nathan Vega. Nathan, podium's yours.
Thank you for hosting us here today. Cybersecurity is actually not my background. I actually have been looking at this space for about 3 years. And it's amazing, though, when you start to think about it. And I'm glad that you guys are here to hear more about it, because I think there are several things that are occurring. And one of them is just evolving awareness on what cybersecurity is and what it means, and how does it impact us. And just a little short anecdote about that. How many people have a mobile phone here, right? Everybody? Okay. So back, last May or so, Apple said, hey, we've got this new technology, Face ID, coming out. You're going to be able to just look at your phone, open it up. You can pay with things, right? Paying with my face. Sounded great. I mean, that is a huge problem I had with the old iPhones, is how many times do I have to punch in all these numbers? And I was really excited about it. I mean, that was really cool. I made the call at like 4 o'clock in the morning. It was one of the first in lines. I was going to get it on the day of. Then I started thinking for a second, okay, wait, I've been looking at this space. What does that really mean for me? What am I trading off here in terms of convenience? It's in the news, right? It's not uncommon that you can go through a border security gate now and have them open your phone and look at your social profile, look at your mail, look at your files, right? I don't have anything to hide, but at the same time, I don't want anybody to know what I'm looking for either, right? And so I had to make those considerations. I actually canceled my pre-order. I spent about a week or two trying to understand what that technology is, what was the background behind it. It's really fascinating. I mean, if you really get into it, it's like a miniature Microsoft Connect. It looks at 200 discrete muscles on your face. It's like 1 in a million. I mean, it's really cool technology. It took me about a week or two to figure out what that was and understand what was behind the scenes. If that was hacked, if I'm dead, can somebody use my phone to open it with my face? I don't know. I needed to answer those questions. By the time I got to ordering the phone, I got back in line. I got my phone 3 months later, right? So within a week or so, I had fallen behind and not able to get my phone for 3 months. And this is for an individual consumer product from a company that largely has earned my trust in Apple, right? So when I thought about that, and I said, now transport that to business and the role of CIO that some of these guys are doing, right? They're looking at hundreds of vendors, thousands of vendors, software products, hardware products, cloud, on-prem, off-prem, mobile devices brought in. Imagine having to take that and scale it across an enterprise and look at what are we really putting in place? What risk am I trading off for convenience? What are these new things? And that awareness alone and just being able to understand that and ask those questions, I think is the evolving place that we're at in terms of individuals, right? We're asking a lot of our vendors to keep us safe, But at the end of the day, we are the weakest component in that cybersecurity world, right? We're the ones that click on the links to the cat videos. We're the ones that install the malware thinking it was something else, an Excel spreadsheet, right? So the awareness part is important. So I'm glad that you guys are here, and I'm glad that we have this panel to talk about that. And in that same vein, I think it's important that we keep thinking about these things, and it is only going to be something that we consider more and more over time. So with that, I want to hand it over to the panel. The first question I always like to ask, I think it's on everybody's mind. I'll ask Jeff. He's a career cybersecurity guy. Jeff, why are cybersecurity people so grumpy all the time?
Are you calling me grumpy? Well, it's interesting. I think that there's probably a proportion or a relationship between how long you've been in the field and how grumpy you are. So I've been in the field, I like to say, since before it was cool. I've been doing security since the early 90s. I think what frustrates security people is we see a lot of the same problems happening over and over again. And some of the major breaches that have occurred recently have been the result of failure to apply patches. Really? I mean, we've known about that since about 1987. But it's hard, in a very large environment. It's just ask Equifax how hard it is to keep a large system up to date. I think things like that frustrate security people. I think that issues with law enforcement and jurisdiction and difficulty and criminalizing some of these activities, there's really no cost to the bad guys. That's kind of dejecting if you're a defender. If you are operating in the physical world and you have a bad guy that's just, running around, mugging people, eventually they're going to get caught and they're going to be in jail, and that's going to be a score for the good guys. In the cyber world, that really doesn't happen. The bad guys, particularly outside of friendly jurisdictions, operate largely with impunity. And if they get caught or they get turned away, too bad, so sad, they'll do it again tomorrow. And so that's also very frustrating as defenders as well. Also, I guess there's a relationship between how long you've been in tech and how much gray hair you have, and how generally, grumpy or persnickety you are. So there's some of that as well.
Jeff's photo was taken last week, by the way. So if you read the Verizon data breach report that comes out every year, they said 90% of the breaches are for basically monetary gain, right? And it's either going to be monetary gain or industrial espionage. And there is an evolving set of threats. If you look at Maersk as a ransomware attack or an attack, worm attack, we've had a number of those that have occurred. These evolving threats are creating challenges for businesses that they hadn't anticipated before, right? I'm a distribution company. Why would you're not stealing something. I don't have finances. I don't have a bank account back here that you can steal from, but you can shut down the business, right? And you can actually impact their revenues and their customers and the downstream impacts this third parties that they work for. In that same vein, so, David, you've been around for a while. You've been doing the CIO role at Battelle, and can you talk a little bit about how you've seen threats evolve, how you've seen the role of CIO and security and specifically evolve?
Sure, but let me start with kind of answering Jeff's question too. I think that we should almost change our title from CIO to Chief Bad Guy. Because we are the guys that are telling the folks that work for us, no, you can't do that. No, you can't bring that device in here. No, you can't download that software. And there's a reason for that. We don't do it because we want to tell you no. It's because you expose us, and the attack vector becomes open for people coming in to compromise our environments. If you work with us, we can work with you to get things done, but unfortunately, a lot of times the first word out of our mouths is no. But so, how are people coming after us? How are they attacking us? The threat vectors have changed. They're coming after us in a lot of ways, but even though things have changed, one thing has become very consistent, and that is email. Phishing email, people coming after us via email, compromising credentials to get into your environment is still probably the #1 attack that people will see. You'll see very, very sophisticated emails coming into your environment, and we've seen some really sophisticated ones that are based in social engineering. So we love to put all of our information out there, whether it is on your corporate website, your social media. We know who the CEO is. We know what his org chart looks like. We know how to go up and down your chain. And so we know where to send the emails and what type of email to send you in order for you to think that it's legit. And once you respond to that, once you click that link, you're had. And it only takes us one time. And what we've also seen is a lot of the folks that are coming after you have changed their tactics, and instead of coming directly after you, they will go one level out. And so they will figure out who you're doing business with. And they're going to do a compromise of Jeff. And once they compromise Jeff, they now have legitimate credentials to communicate with you. And they'll come right through the front door. It's no longer looking at, oh, I see this threat out here. You know, I think this is Jeff, and I'll give him all access that he needs. Now you have a real problem. That's, I believe, the way that Target was had, right? There was a legitimate credentials that were used to get into their environment. And once that happened, they were able to go all across that network and compromise the entire company. So think about it from a CIO perspective, from a CEO perspective. Are those people still in their jobs? No, because they thought they had it covered and they really didn't. So it takes a level of humbleness to understand that, you know, there's a saying in the security world, either there are two companies out there, those that have been hacked or those that don't know that they've been hacked. Right? That's really true. The bad guys that are coming after us are very sophisticated, and they have a lot of tools, and they can change probably quicker than we can change to combat them.
162 days to the average time of detection or something like that, I believe. Right. Ervan, do you have anything to add?
You know, yeah. So I always like to think of cybersecurity as Tootsie Roll Pop. You know, how many licks does it take to get to the center? And a lot of that is with regards to the folks that are around you. It's no longer the senior citizens that are being targeted and compromised to get their bank accounts, et cetera. It's the gamut. And if it's sometimes too true to be true, it's valid. You have just won a $100 gift certificate. All you need to do is click on this very link. 9 times out of 10, if you click on that link, even though it says www.amazon.com free money, if you hover over it, you'll see that it's taking you someplace that you don't want to go to. So I've learned to appreciate cybersecurity from a CIO perspective because it's in my domain. When I lost my CISO, which stands for, trying not to use a lot of acronyms here, but Chief Information Security Officer, I became the CIO and the CISO. So, you know, having arguments with myself as to whether I should do this not, you know, it's the Jekyll and Hyde, you know, kind of a scenario. But at the end of the day, you know, security is very important. And David's right. You know, we often say no initially to try and figure out, okay, how does this impact the overall environment? You know, Jeff made the comment with regards to, you know, hair going gray. Well, in my case, no hair, so.
I'll add, though, there is good news. So despite my grumpiness as a security guy, I'm also generally an optimist. And I think that so many people in the IT space and in the security space behave as though all this stuff just kind of comes at us at random. And that all we can do is, you know, plug holes in the dam and react to all the, you know, crazy, you know, uber elite kids that can, you know, handwrite code. And in reality, and this is good for us on the defense side, bad guys are lazy, right? Bad guys are lazy, and they tend to do the same things over and over and over again. They do the same things over and over and over again because they work. Email works, phishing works, right? So that's good for us defenders, because if we focus on what the bad guys are actually doing and understand what the bad guys are actually doing and defend against that, then our defenses will be far, far better than if we kind of do this, what I see a lot, defending in a vacuum or defending against a ghost. There is a cyber playing field, if you will. There is a field of play. There are plays that the bad guys use. Very, very common techniques, very common tools. And so it's important for all of us as defenders in our business environment and in our personal environment to understand what sorts of plays the bad guys will use against us and defend against that.
So you touched on something there, the bad guys are lazy. I think it is a job, right? If you start to break it down, the criminals this is a way for them to make money. They're going to do it in the least amount of effort possible to make the money, just like a lot of people will do it their job, right? I don't need to dig 5 holes a day, I'm going to dig 4 because that's what they asked me to do, right? And so in that same vein, it makes me think about one of the conversations a lot of people have, like how can all these things happen, right? We see a lot of the scale happening in terms of attacks. And Jeff, I'm just going to cue you because you have a great anecdote around the script kiddies and how there's really only a very small number of people that have the sophistication to build the tools. However, the number of people grows exponentially very rapidly.
Yeah, that's, so, if you read the papers and the media, it sounds like new vulnerabilities are being discovered every day, and, this is vulnerable and that's vulnerable and there's this bug or this exploit. And again, it just sounds, incomprehensible or undefendable. But if you look at what's actually the structure of the space, there's actually a very small number of individuals globally that are discovering new vulnerabilities, that are actually the people that are finding these particular issues. Thousands globally, single-digit thousands, very small. Many of them work for governments and intelligence agencies, and some of them work for our governments and our intelligence agencies. Some of them are independent researchers. But it's a relatively small community. Unless you're in the national security space, critical infrastructure space, you're not facing those people directly. You're facing people that are using their tools and their techniques and that have weaponized them and wrapped them in tools. So your standard bad guy that's looking to make a couple $1,000s isn't inventing some new vulnerability to hack you. They're using a tool or a technique that's well understood, that's used by lots of other folks, and is targeting lots of other people at the same time. This is an important dynamic in the space because it actually, if defenders work to understand that dynamic, it makes us more efficient because there's actually a relatively small number of techniques that we need to understand and defend against that are being used by a large number of attackers against us across the board. So we can kind of flip the dynamics of the space to our advantage as defenders, and by really understanding what the bad guys are bringing to bear and understanding how we defend against that, we'll get better.
So, do you have anything you want to add, Jeff? So we're cruising through a lot of topics here, and it's a short amount of time. But one thing I did want to try to focus on when we've got a few more minutes before we'll ask for questions was, a lot of times it's really, how do I get started, or what can I be doing differently, and what am I not really thinking about? And oftentimes I think we focus a lot on it's got to be super sophisticated to solve the challenge. But I think Jeff has been instrumental in really helping us at the Collaboratory build products and services around being practical, but also helping mentor other CISOs in the space on how to be practical, how to think about getting started, how to move from A to B, because it's not about the end state as much as it's how am I maturing and understanding the landscape. And as we think about evolving threats, changing legislation, those are important aspects. So I wanted to ask you, Jeff, what would you give advice? What are practical things? How do people get started? What would you recommend for people to look at?
So, it's funny. One of the many reasons, I guess, that security people are grumpy is because so much of what happens in our space is just fundamentally not practical. It's a very blinky light, vendor, whiz-bang driven space. If you're in IT and have been to any of the big trade shows in security, or you get marketed to by security vendors, and security vendors are fine, we need them. However, it's very disorienting and very confusing. No matter what your question is, or no matter what your problem is, there's a tool for that. There's something to buy, and it solves, this little part of the problem, and there's 75 other pieces over here that you probably should be looking at, but aren't. And it's very confusing. The largest security trade show in our space is a show every year in San Francisco called RSA, and it's daunting how many vendors are there. And even as a security guy, it's hard to walk around and even just understand what people are doing. It's a very, very inaccessible and very difficult space. And so, we're here in Columbus, Ohio. I like, good old Midwest practical security. Talk to me about vulnerability management. Don't worry about, your, Uber super duper intrusion prevention system, or your, CASB, or your, don't stop, hang on with all those things. First, make sure that you go home every night and you're happy with how you're doing with vulnerability management. Vulnerability management is, anytime you have more than 2 systems, you're going to have an order, right, of what they get patched. Understanding how they're patched and when they're patched and in what order, what priority order, that's vulnerability management. By the way, read the GAO report about the Equifax breach. It's fascinating. So GAO investigated the Equifax breach because IRS was a big client, and so GAO thought they should look into it. And Equifax is a sophisticated organization, no picking on anybody, but the GAO report reads like a comedy of errors. There was a basic failure in vulnerability management. They had an internal email list. They knew about the particular vulnerability. Most of their sysadmins got out and patched it, but the email list wasn't quite up to date and they missed a few. Okay? And then just on and on with this kind of failure in basic blocking and tackling, right? That's how we're getting hurt. We're getting hurt when, Mabel in accounting clicks on an email that she, shouldn't have clicked on because it had cat videos. That's not Mabel in accounting's fault, right? That's people like me's fault for having a system that makes Mabel understand that or fails when she doesn't. But it's important to understand the basics. Okay, David mentioned multi-factor authentication. So once you go home every day and you're happy with your vulnerability management system and you feel great and you sleep well at night because all your systems are patched and up to date and you feel good about that, then start thinking about credentialing. So human beings choose horrible passwords. We know human beings choose horrible passwords. How many people, don't raise your hand, but have, some combination of Go Bucks, in their password? How many people have...
Change it every 90 days. Remember it, though, right?
Right. So, fascinating little anecdote here. Up until last year, the payment card industry, the standard for passwords was of the sets, uppercase, lowercase, digits, and special characters, you had to have at least 3 of those 4, and you have to change your password every 90 days. We've all probably dealt with some, you type in something, no, that's not strong enough. You type in something, no, that's not strong enough. Put some more exclamation marks on the end, Okay. So when faced with uppercase, lowercase, digit, special, change your password every 90 days, what do human beings do? They come up with a password strategy like spring 2018, exclamation mark, fall 2018, exclamation mark. Okay, well, that's fine. You think the bad guys have that figured out? Absolutely. What helps you with that? Multi-factor authentication, just like David said. So after you're really happy about your vulnerability management program and you sleep well every night, now start thinking about authentication, passwords, multi-factor. If you can use a cloud platform like Office 365 or something that will basically give you multi-factor for free, use it. All of our personal accounts, so if you use Google, if you use your banks mostly require you to do something now. Anywhere you can turn on multi-factor, do it. It's not a panacea, but it makes the bad guy's job a lot harder, and they'll probably just go on to somebody else. The third thing I would say that's less technical is to start thinking about security as a risk problem, not a technology problem. So most people in information security grew up as technologists. Me, I'm a nerd. I've been a nerd for all my life. And most people in security are nerds. And so the answer to a security question or a security problem is technology. Is a tool, is some blinky light thing. that's fine. But increasingly, security should be viewed as and discussed as a risk question. Risk of partners, risk of relationships. What can be transferred and dealt with in contracts? What can be transferred and dealt with vendor management programs? What sorts of questions do we want to ask of our HVAC vendors? Should our HVAC vendors really be able to, get onto our core cash register network? Just ask Target how they feel about that one. These are business risk questions, and the successful next generation of security practitioners will be able to communicate in terms of risk with the business, with their CEOs, with their boards, with their risk committees or CFOs. And I would encourage all of us to think about trade-offs and risk as opposed to just making it a technical problem.
It's interesting, you bring that up, and the next generation of security individuals that are coming through. I was talking to my daughter the other night, and she's at the Metro School, and the Metro School sent all the parents a notice that they were going to implement monitoring of all the kids' web traffic while on their network. So I was like, talking to my daughter, I said, hey, the Metro's going to start monitoring your web traffic. You need to be careful what you're doing. She's like, yeah, okay, whatever. No, really, you need to be worried about it. Why are you talking to me about this? I'm like, I want to look at myself in the mirror like I must have a third head or something. There's something going on. I said, this is a concern for you. She said, well, what are they talking about? I said, well, they're going to monitor what you're doing. She said, well, but I've been using the VPN since 8th grade. Why is that an issue? Like, what? So these kids are actually much more sophisticated than a lot of the adults I deal with, and they know security a whole lot better than a lot of us. And they know to encrypt their traffic and to do VPNs, and they've been doing this for years. It's just second nature for them.
We're at 12:57. We'd like to take questions from CMC. So I would, if you guys have some questions, I would encourage you guys to make your way over to the microphone over here on the side, and we'll ask for a couple of them in a minute. But Ervan, I wanted to give you a chance too if you wanted to talk about.
Yeah. So I think for the most part, a lot of businesses. Again, I'll hit on what can you do free. There are a lot of free antivirus software that you can install on your machine. It's not the latest and greatest. However, there is some level of capability. Passwords. Make sure your passwords you don't use the same password, go Bucks 1987 for everything. Make sure that there is a combination of some sort that you can remember, catchphrases, et cetera. And if you're looking for free resources, if you go to the ohioattorneygeneral.gov, I'm not pushing it, but I'm pushing free products. And if you type in Cyber Ohio, you'll come back with presentations that have been a combination of board members, those that are working in that group, where you can download free resources that are available to you today at no charge. Also, you can request to have presentations, and a team will come out and get you up to speed so that you're in the playing field.
Great. I see a question back here.
I'm Carol Looper. I have been getting at least 2 calls a day on my cell, 2 calls a day on my landline. They are from different area codes, and they all say, I am your Microsoft technician, and I need to check your desktop because you have a problem. My response is always, I have a son and a grandson who work for Microsoft. You are not my Microsoft technician. Please take me off your list. However, they are coming from different area codes, including 614. I write them down, and I try to block them, but I think there are too many to block. I say, take me off your list. What can I do to stop these calls?
So the phenomenon you're describing is, Nathan mentioned earlier, the bad guys, for the most part, most bad guys that we face, right, are rational criminal actors. They just want money, right? So that's actually helpful in a number of ways for defenders because we're dealing with a rational adversary. Dealing with irrational adversaries is really, really hard, actually. And so this particular scam, there's been quite a bit of it lately, and I've been getting those calls too. They have a story, and basically at the end of the day, they want to get your credit card number, your bank account information, and there's different cover stories. There's tech support, there's, we found some lost funds, there's, a whole bunch of cover stories that They're all plays on the old Nigerian scams of 15 years ago, right, where we got the emails that said we were an heir to a Nigerian prince and, they want to split $1 million with us. This is the modern version of those. A funny thing about our kids, so I have a 9-year-old, and he has learned to, it's actually called trolling, but you basically play with those people. So when they call, you're doing it with your with your son and your grandson at Microsoft, but my son will understand immediately, and he's 9. Will understand immediately what's going on, and he'll say, "Oh my gosh, my computer, sure, what do I need to do? What do I need to press?" And he'll get them going, and wait a minute, what do I need to do here? And he's just having fun, and eventually they'll hang up. But aside from that, in all honesty, there actually really isn't anything you can do. The numbers roll because they've compromised PBX systems and have access to more telephone numbers than any of us, have. And so there's nothing you can do other than just, block them, ignore them. If you're, if it's a quiet Thursday night and you want to have fun with them, go for it. One thing in particular, though, they have found that our parents, elderly folks, are particularly vulnerable to these sorts of scams. My mom is pretty astute, but she got one of these phone calls that said that it was the IRS and they needed to talk to her about her tax return. And, she called me and said, "Well, that one I have to take, right?" I'm like, no, especially not that one. I think we need to look out for people that may that may be more vulnerable. We need to take care of each other and look out for people and educate people.
I would also echo that. It's not just the phone calls, it's the emails that are coming to our older citizens that they just don't know what's legit.
I commend you for coming up with a Microsoft technician. That's a fantastic defense. One of the things that we've learned is that their tech support is the best in the world. I mean, they will go out of their way. Well, they're motivated because they want to get your information. So hats off to you.
They do work for Microsoft, by the way.
Hi, I'm Carol Newcomb, and Jeff and Nathan, nice to see you. I have one simple question. I have at least 50 passwords. Right now I have them handwritten on a piece of paper, which I have to find every time I can't remember one. Is there a better way to keep all these passwords?
Yeah,
Next
keypass.info. Free tool in the spirit, KeyPass, K-E-E pass.info. It's a free tool. I have no affiliation. It's the one that I use. So there are several password managers out there. Increasingly, our operating systems are doing it for us. So a modern Mac OS with modern Safari will actually suggest, like when it comes to a field where it's type in a new password, if you notice, it'll actually come up with a random password for you and say, "Hey, do you want to use this?" There's a password manager kind of built in. And those are good as well. But yeah, look into one of the free tools, LastPass, KeyPass, something like that.
Hi, I'm Trip Lazarus. I am a former software developer. I'm wondering what government can do to help us here. I mean, it just seems to me that on a telephone, there should be some way where we can guarantee that the caller ID is accurate, that people aren't allowed to spoof. That would get rid of so much. And the same with email. I understand that would be much more difficult because the systems are more open. But you would think maybe we do need to proceed to a world where these links and these networks have the force of law behind them instead of it being the Wild West. I've just wondered what your all comments about that would be.
As fast as we can come up with the laws, the criminals are, 1 step, 2 step, 3 steps ahead. I get those same phone calls, and it's along lines of, so I kept my number originally from Lansing, Michigan, and I kept my phone number, and it looks like someone's calling me from back home. So initially I started answering it, and after a while it's just mirroring off of my telephone number, but it's the spoofing technology that they have. And by the time you catch up with them, a consumer section, they're doused with all of the complaints that we get. As soon as we track them down, they're shut down that office and they're on to doing something different. So I think it's just a matter of trying to stay in tune and continue to create new legislation that would kind of eventually catch up with them in the end.
I think we call it whack-a-mole, right? As soon as you find one and you combat that, it pops up someplace else. So unfortunately, there's not a whole lot you can do.
You raise an age-old philosophical question, though, that actually has been debated as long as I've been in the space, and it's about requiring authenticated access to networks, right? So if you peel apart all the problems we have, right, with the phone situation, with the internet, with email, with everything, the basic problem is that what's the old comic? Nobody knows that, on the internet, nobody knows you're a dog. You guys see that, right? 15 years ago, one frame. But, I can connect and interact on the internet with no assertion of identity, with no proof of identity. In fact, I can interact on the internet and assert my identity as anybody up here or any of you. And that whole set of problems is the root cause of most of the security issues that we have today, if you peel it all apart. On the flip side, that is also the core reason that the internet has grown into the defining innovation of humanity, and the free and open exchange of information that it is globally. Is because of the ability to connect and interact with relative ease, connect and interact without onerous identification requirements. And every time somebody has come up with some sort of a plan or idea proposal to introduce onerous identification or authentication requirements, I think valid free speech, First Amendment, freedom of the press, all of those sorts of issues start to come up correctly, and then about 35 seconds later, somebody will say, yeah, well, who requires strong identification of internet actors? China. So do we want to really do that? It's a trade-off. I would say probably as humanity, we're getting a lot more benefit, and we got to figure out how to deal with these issues.
I think we also see, just that vein, we see the rapid evolution of technology forcing us into spaces that maybe we didn't anticipate. So as a distinct example, my phone and our phones more and more are becoming our authentication device, right? It's a semblance of us. Our phone number was never meant to be that, right? And so this evolution, we want easy things to do. We want the new technologies, and oftentimes we move so fast that we don't think about necessarily the ramifications of what that has to do. And I think we see that in the spillover of these systems being compromised in easy ways because it was inherent in the system before. It wasn't there.
Can you talk a little bit about ransomware? I'm really fascinated about what happened in the city of Atlanta and how it actually didn't make more news that a city got ransomed. And is that a bigger threat in the future, or is it something that...
It's a huge threat. So in the same Verizon report that I just mentioned, this year, 2018, the first time they ever talked about ransomware embedded in malware was in 2012. So we're 6 years out from that first report. It represents 46% of all attacks now. Right, so this is an evolving space, and thank you for the setup, because I was actually going to ask about, there's this sort of notion of targeted attacks and untargeted attacks, and ransomware oftentimes falls into that untargeted attack. So let me set it up that way for the panel. Jeff or anybody?
Ransomware is bad. Yeah, I mean, if you get to the point where you have your computer hard drive encrypted and you can't use it, there's not a whole lot of options that are available to you to recover from that. If you don't have a good backup of your data, then you're either going to have to pay the ransom or you're stuck. I mean, there's just not a lot of things you can do from that perspective.
But don't pay the ransom.
Yeah.
Don't pay the ransom. That just encourages the bad guys. Don't pay the ransom.
I agree. The one thing that I think is important is having good hygiene. In a lot of these cases, it's just like going to the dentist. If you don't go to the dentist on a regular basis, you have other problems, or you don't repair your car. it's going to lead to other issues. In the case of City of Atlanta, patching is critical. Good hygiene, having a good, strong cybersecurity program in place where you go through the rigor, you go through the monthly, the quarterly updates, you apply those things, even though it may be a disturbance to your business. It's critical. It needs to be a part of the risk that you take on as a way of doing business. But yes, ransomware is bad.
Remember, bad guys are rational criminal actors, right? So what we've seen in the short history of cyber stuff is an evolution of different ways to monetize. And so, it started with stealing, bank identifying information, credit card numbers, bank account numbers, things like that. As the banks got smarter at killing fraud, when those numbers are disclosed, that sort of thing went down. A credit card number now in the black market has almost zero value. A checking account number in the black market now has almost zero value because the banks are so good at shutting off fraudulent activity. And so the bad guys have moved along. All they want is money. Ransomware is the current, way to get money, and they'll do it because it's easy and it's relatively low risk until it doesn't get them money anymore. Then they'll move on to something else. By the way, we're seeing a really significant uptick in what I call individual extortion. If a corporate email account is compromised and a bad guy calls the company and says, give me $1 million and I'll delete all your email and won't put it on, the dark web or wherever. Most Western companies call the FBI at that point. We don't take real kindly to being extorted. However, what the bad guys have found is that if they compromise Jeff's email account and then they reach out to Jeff and they say, you probably don't really want your boss to see what's in your email account, do you? Or you probably really don't want your wife to see what's in your email account, do you? Give me $5,000 and I'll delete it. People do. They do. In frightening amounts. And people are just getting they're getting railroaded with that because obviously cats already, first of all, they might not have ever been doing anything wrong, but people are falling victim to that because they're embarrassed and they don't know any better. We've seen that with a lot of the compromises of adult websites. With the Adult Friend Finder and Ashley Madison and some of those from a couple years ago, we had large scams going where they would email people and say, boy, you're in the Adult Friend Finder database, give me $5,000 and I'll delete you. Lots of people fell for it, and it's sad, but it works.
I think we have time for one more question. Okay, good.
My name is Sarah Edwards. I'm with Merrill Lynch. My question goes back to spoofing. Lately, my husband and I have been getting a lot of callbacks from people we didn't call, and they said, hey, I got something from your number. Is there any protection against that? Because I think we can all agree that the do not call list is only so effective.
If you're getting a lot of those, your PBX might be hacked, and you might want to look into that, quite honestly.
What does that mean?
Your phone system. Talk to your phone system person. Because that's how the bad guys will compromise your phone system and then use your phone numbers.
Okay, so
if people are calling you saying, why are you calling me? There's a chance that they might be using your phone numbers because of that.
Carrier like Verizon or AT&T, is that what
you mean your business? Or you said?
No, it's a personal cell phone. It's an iPhone.
Oh, well, that's different. Yeah, that's harder.
Oh, good.
Yeah, that's harder. There's no authentication in that system at all. So, I mean, if somebody wanted to, put on the caller ID your phone number or my phone number, 555-1234, they can. There's no authentication in that at all. So, for some reason, they like your number. So, yay you.
One more.
Yes, my name is John McKnight with Rife's Auto Body. David, you'd mentioned earlier that your information, I think you said your family's information is already out there. You said the cat's out of the bag and you can't put it back in. Is there any one area or areas that I'm most vulnerable to that cat getting out of the bag? Not so much my credit card number got picked off of, Target's server and they used my credit card number, but my identity, all of my information out there. Is there a certain thing or things I should be looking at where I'm going to be most vulnerable for that kind of thing, where I need to really pay attention?
Well, I actively monitor what's going on with my credit and do that for my entire family. If I see accounts being created kind of randomly or something that I'm not familiar with, I do that. But again, with my data being compromised, you said my social security number, where I live, I had 10 years of tax returns in that database that got compromised, and fingerprints, by the way, and all that got compromised. So there's only so much I can do. There's only so much that's going to be available to us to do that. We just have to be kind of vigilant in just looking at what new is happening within my space, within accounts or different things that are being created.
Hi, thanks for coming. This has been really interesting. You made two references to the dark web, and the layman's perception, my perception is it's someplace that only bad guys go to, and once you're on, you're done. But can you tell us a little about the black web and who accesses it and how it works and so on? The dark web, I mean, I'm sorry.
I'll let him tell you what the dark web is, but quite frankly, the dark web is nothing that much different than the regular web. Yeah. A lot of people think that there's this innocuous place, and it's really not. It's just more curated, and the access is not available to everybody. So.
Yeah, I mean, in all candor, the dark web is mostly a marketing term invented by people in the security space to sell you stuff. There's a little bit more to it than that. It's essentially stuff on the internet that is not readily accessible through a simple Google search is basically, you have to do something else to access it. But aside from that, and typically, illicit activity tends to happen there because of that, because it's not something that's going to be easily findable. But if you know where to go, then you can get there. But it's just the parts of the internet that aren't, that don't have the nice little Google front end on it, pretty much.
The one thing I'll add is in the last comment, it would just be along the lines of, don't go there unless you know what you're doing. Your computer will get eaten up in the first 2 minutes that you're on there, and you'll have more malware than what you know what to do with. So.
The irony is that the people that run those different websites really do a good job in managing who gets in. So,
yeah.
It's very tough to get into some of those spaces. If you're not a trusted person to come into those dark websites, you're not going to get in.
Whack-a-mole. You'll be the mole.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, speakers, for a fascinating forum. And as a way to show you a token of our esteem, we will be sending you a link to a gift. All you got to do is input your credit card number, because there is some shipping that's involved in that. But it'll be from CMC. Don't worry, it's secure.
Totally legit.
Totally legit. We encourage you to continue the conversation with coffee and cookies. And guests, we'd love for you to make your way back to the CMC patio and become a member. Let's thank Carlisle, Patchen, and Murphy, and Battelle for their support. And of course, our speakers, Ervan Rogers II, David White, Jeff Schmidt, and Nathan Vega. And thanks to all of you. We hope to see you here next week and every week.